My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently?
Okay, so I want to speak to you, listeners, and you, David, of Bellet Osc. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It might be Bellet Osc. I'm going to go with Bellet Osc.
Bellet Osc. All right, tell me about this.
Yeah, so Bellet Osc is mentioned very briefly in the Vornheim setting book. Vornheim is a pretty famous setting for Lamentations of the Flame Princess by Zach Smith. I'm presently running World of Dungeons in that setting. I'm doing it kind of episodically in this series I'm calling Vornheim Stories. Bellet Osc is this city, this ancient city that is in the surrounding lands, like the lands that surround Vornheim. And it's mentioned and described in basically 2 short paragraphs in the Vornheim book. There's not much information on it. And also, he goes into it a little bit in a really old blog post on his blog, because I guess it was like a setting that he was running in his D&D game a while back. Anyway, in the Vornheim book, which is what I was working off of at the time, it just describes the city as originally a leprosarium, like where they would send, people with leprosy. And these people built this city. And over time, the Vornheim doesn't really explain how, but I guess it came to be a city filled with mad people. So it's this ancient old city basically filled with crazy people. I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. They talk about there's this lich that lives in the middle of it, and he has this moat with these 7 black swans. And I was loving all these details. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to make a little Vornheim story out of this. Something to do with these 7 black swans. I decided to make the black swans the lich's phylactery, and so the party had to go and collect one of them for their employer. Anyway, what I didn't foresee was how much fun we were going to have in Bellet Osc. This has turned out to be it was such a big hit, and everyone was really, really into it because it was an urban environment, but it's an urban environment filled with very, very just strange, undependable people because they're not well, they're insane, but they still manage to have a city life, they still manage to have some things, and so it was interesting. Well, so when they first got to the city, I asked them, this is a thing I often do, I asked the party some questions, to kind of get them to help me paint the world, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, tell me a little bit about what does your characters see that lets them know that this is a really ancient city? Or what do they see that lets them know that this is a city filled with people who are insane? And based off those answers that we got, we kind of developed this really interesting just locale. We kind of explored some of that stuff, and they had their little mission they were doing. But, we had a really great moment in an inn or a pub where there was a group of people playing for teeth. They were rolling dice for teeth. And if you wanted to join the game, you had to they would rip out one of your teeth and you had to put your tooth up for that. And we had a character who won some teeth, and that was pretty great.
Oh my God. Why do you want to win teeth?
It's Bellet Osc, who knows? One of the things that Zach mentions in the text is this parade that is constantly going through the city. And he doesn't talk much about it, but we really fleshed it out. We made it this dangerous, never-ending parade of people that will try to grab you and gather you up and quote feed you to the fishes, right? And we had that happen on screen to to an NPC, and it was pretty gruesome. Yeah, it was just really cool. We had we developed a lot of the little details about the city, the fact that for whatever reason they bury their dead head first, upside down, so you just see feet sticking up out of the ground in different varying stages of decay, just stuff like that. It was really, really great. Everybody really loved just everything that was going on. The mission became almost incidental to just exploring this city together, right? And I say exploring together because we were kind of just feeding off each other and having all these cool things happen. I just wanted to say that I think we're going to go back to it before the series is over because it was so popular. And I might even try to, bang up something for Dungeon World for it, because I really, really liked it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's awesome. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For? Jason, I want to make you aware of a wonderful thing called Ink-tober.
Yeah.
I've had a ton of fun watching it as different artists participate in Ink-tober. And what it is during the month of October, all these artists are drawing in really small sketchbooks using only very limited resources of like pens and things like that. And they're doing some really cool stuff. They do one drawing every day and post it on G+, and you can find Ink-tober by searching for Ink-tober. What's particularly exciting to me and to Dungeon World players is that Ray Otis, who did the artwork for the cover of our podcast, is doing Ink-tober, and he's doing second edition D&D monsters that have like bizarre names and kind of terrible art initially, and he's trying to make them cool or scary.
Yeah, I've seen some of them. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Some of them are so good. Oh my god. He's done the flail snail, which like on its surface.
Well, that's not even. Yeah, that's that's not even a D&D monster.
I
That's
don't even
just a
think that
joke,
one
right?
is. I think you just made that one up, but that one's like great. I love that one.
Yeah, well, flail snail is like a that's an internet thing, right? Like it means like something has failed or whatever, right? Like I think that's what that means. But anyway, yeah, I like the way he interpreted that. Like it's a snail with like actual like spiked flails.
Yeah,
coming out
it's
of its
like
head.
it's like a 20-foot tall snail that's got heads of that are like war flails that'll try and crush hapless adventurers. Yeah, so Ray is selling them for donations to Extra Life to support his friend Jim Jones. So if you want to grab one of those little pieces of art, not only will you get the physical piece of art, but he also will give you the rights to it if you want to use it in a zine or some other related activity.
Well, yeah, because Jim Jones is raising money for a children's hospital, right? That's
Yeah, the Riley Hospital for Children.
And he sold a bunch of them, which is really cool. I love Ink-tober. I remember it from last year. It's really neat. It's fun. You can just hashtag Ink-tober in G+, and you can see all the different things that people are doing. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's all I really had to say about it.
Cool.
Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be.
Okay, so Dungeon World players out there in listenership land, I'm about to make your characters' lives a hell of a lot more dangerous.
You're also about to make combat way more interesting.
Yeah, I know. So here's the deal. Hack and slash. We need to have a conversation about hack and slash. I think it is very common, and I do it myself. I'm also very guilty of it. I don't mind fessing up to it. But it's very common, like when you get a 7 to 9 or you get a 6- on the hack and slash result, for the monster or whatever you're fighting to just do their listed damage, right? And you describe that and then you kind of move on, right? It's very, very common. Like I would venture to say 90% of games I've either run or have been in as a player have that becomes sort of the routine, right? Because it's easy. A long time ago, when I first started running Dungeon World, and I was really, really mindful of the text and not getting into lazy habits, I had there was a character who was fighting a Sahwagin, which is like a razor-teethed fish humanoid, right? They got a 7 to 9, and for my move, I had the Sahwagin bite off the character's arm. Okay, I had him bite off their arm, and it was like a whole big controversial thing. Like after the fight was over, like we had to have a great big discussion about it. It was just a big fucking drama, and I had to bust out the rule book and show how what I just did was totally legit and not just me being a dick and cheating, if you can even cheat in games like this. But so the text says under hack and slash, the enemy's counterattack can be any GM move made directly with that creature. Okay. This is very often overlooked, okay, as far as hack and slash goes. One of the GM moves is use a monster, danger, or location move, okay? And one of the Sahwagin's moves is bite off a limb, all right? Now, bear in mind, that's not necessarily hit point damage. It's just fictional positioning damage, but I mean, it could be hit point damage. A lot of GMs forget about this, and a lot of players, when they first start playing Dungeon World, whenever the GM does this to them, they're taken a little aback, right? That's totally legit. All the monsters have moves listed in their entries, and those are all things you can do instead of just dealing your damage, right?
Yeah. I'm really glad that we're brightlining this now, because we did this. We demonstrated this in our comic strip AP section where, we did this where Lucero fought the orc and he got his eye put out and he got his leg cut. He never took any hit point damage in that fight.
Well, and those were actually from 6 minuses. You can do it on a 7 to 9 too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's not because on a 7 to 9 the monster does their attack, right? So their counterattack. So yeah, don't forget this. This is a really key, important element of running the game, and in fact, it helps make the fights like very, very interesting, right? And more dangerous in some ways. And I think that's really ideal. Also, it can also make them a little less dangerous if that's what you need to be the case as the GM, right? If the character's down to 2 hit points and you don't really want to see them go to the Black Gate right at this moment, try one of the monster moves. Maybe the monster does something like cast a spell or does something else that's not just hit point damage, right? So don't forget it, is what I'm getting at. Also, consider this too. This is a really interesting case. Have the creature do GM moves like point to a looming threat or put someone in a spot, right? Because again, the text says you can do any GM move that the creature is directly doing, right? So, for example, you're fighting an orc, and instead of having the orc do damage with his knife or whatever, he instead jumps on top of the character and puts the blade against their throat, instantly ramping up the stakes of the encounter, right? Like, do that sort of thing. Or maybe there's like they have a caged monster or something, or they reveal that they have a caged monster, like whatever. Like, just be mindful that you can do things other than just deal damage.
Yeah, the fictional positioning elements are what make Dungeon World so unique and special in the world of these dungeon crawl kinds of games. So it's really exciting to engage with that. Obviously, you don't probably always want to do that. You want to do both. You want to have a variety.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I think it's a great thing to bring people back to this fundamental look at the text.
yeah. Every now and then, it's so helpful. It's very helpful to occasionally, especially when you play as much of it as we do, to go back and just read the book every now and then, right? Because you're sometimes reminded of like little nuances and details that have a big impact on the game.
Yeah, and especially with things like this, a lot of people just are learned from watching other people DM, and they never actually read all of the books. So it's very important.
That's true also. I think I know a fair number of people who run Dungeon World just based off having played it with me, right? I don't know if they've ever read the book. So those people should go back and look at the book.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me?
Okay, this week we have another set piece with some attendant magic items like we did last week, or last time with the Triton War Basin. This one is Mean Old Minerva's Wagon of Gifts and Stories. So I'll read the little sort of entry text before we get to the magic items. Old Minerva has lived in her covered wagon, traveling from town to town for as long as anyone can remember. Local women go to her for advice on many practical things, and children love her stories. She is generally tolerant of those who call on her, though she does not suffer idiots, and has a particularly short temper with men. She is never far from her wagon, which is filled with many strange old things. If you happen to meet old Minerva in your travels, maintain a respectful tone with her. She always has something to help with whatever vexes you, but you may have to pay for it with a bit of your dignity. And now there's a custom move associated with Minerva's wagon. If you suffer Minerva's abuse while politely asking for her help, you will roll plus charisma. If you are a man, you make this roll at an additional -1. On a 10 plus, she has something that will help you, either an object or information, and she offers it freely. On a 7 to 9, as above, but she asks for something in return, the GM will tell you what. And now we have a few magic items associated with Mean Old Minerva. You want to read the first one?
Yeah, so the first item is the First Fear. They say all men grew up in fear of a certain stick, and the First Fear is the progenitor of those sticks. If you are a woman brandishing the First Fear, your promise to withhold violence from the stick is always leverage in a parley with a man.
Old Minerva's Bag of Sweets. This bag always contains a handful of sweets hidden amongst the rags, buttons, and lint. You may always use the sweets as leverage in a parley with a child.
Old Minerva's broom. The way old Minerva sees it, most people are careless fools, apt to misplace their foolish heads, if not for the fact they're attached to their foolish necks. Still, she often advises that giving the house a good sweep is a terrific way to find the things you've lost, as well as calm your nerves and clarify your thinking. Her own broom is particularly helpful in this regard. If you discern realities while sweeping an area with old Minerva's broom, you may ask one additional question from the list, even on a 6-.
Old Minerva's Magnifying Stone. This perfectly clear shard of quartz helps old Minerva read small labels and closely examine folks complaining about skin spots, yellowing teeth, or whatever damn thing they're on about today. If you closely examine a person or object with the magnifying stone, the GM will tell you a single fact about the subject that is hidden or secret.
Needle of idle safety. The way old Minerva sees it, idle hands get up to no good, and it's best to chop them off. Given that, you should endeavor to keep them busy, and the mending of clothes is both practical and economical. The needle of idle safety is distinguishable from normal needles by the fact it never rusts and it cannot be bent or broken. If you accidentally prick your finger while using the needle, it means some sort of danger is imminent, though the precise nature of the danger may be unclear. Perhaps something hostile is approaching your position, or your comrade's amazing plan is actually quite a stupid one. Or the minstrel telling you tales by the fire has ill intentions.
Weather wax. This marvelous beeswax, said to be a specially refined version taken from hives that have survived terrible storms, is often stored in a jar with a tiny decorative weather vane affixed to the lid. Any object covered in the wax will not succumb to environmental hazards related to the weather. A scroll will stay dry in the rain. Swords will not rust. A room will stay dry and warm if you seal its windows with the wax, even during the most violent blizzard or storm. The wax can even be rubbed on clothing and armor, transferring its protection to the wearer.
Chester. Chester the cat was mean old Minerva's first and only pet. When he died quite suddenly from unnatural causes, she had him stuffed. To her surprise and delight, the taxidermied tabby was even more charming and loyal than before. If Chester is in your possession and you leave some food out for him at night, you will awake with the certainty that a cat was sleeping on top of you. Chester might even wake you if someone with ill intentions approaches during the night.
All right, so that was mean old Minerva's Wagon of Gifts and Stories. Big thanks to Daniel Fowler for most of those. He came up with the concept and wrote most of those items. So yeah, they're pretty cool.
It's pretty great. I'm curious to how many adventurers out there will be describing themselves repairing clothes so that they can get warned during a make camp.
Yeah, no. You're right. Yeah, you got that needle, right?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next segment. All right, listeners, now we're going to tell you something interesting and something useful.
Okay, so it's time to spout lore about our sponsor, Scablands Press, and their game The Indie Hack, which recently became a silver bestseller on Drive-Thru RPG. So I'm going to tell you something interesting and something useful. First, something interesting. So the core mechanic of the Indie Hack is that you roll 2 dice, a light die and a dark die, one of which is for the GM and the other is for the player. You add certain modifiers and then you compare them. Depending on the outcome, certain degrees of narrative authority are then given to the player and to the GM. That narrative authority usually takes the form of what are called details. They're like these descriptive tags that you can add to a character or to the scene and can later exploit for different kinds of mechanical benefits. We'll probably discuss details in more depth in another sponsorship spot on a future episode. But for now, let me tell you something useful. So this division of narrative authority between player and GM that happens on the core mechanics die roll, it's most salient, I thought, when I ran the Indie Hack. It was most salient and really cool when it involved like the player character doing an investigation or evaluating a scene, right? Kind of like what a Discern Realities would be in Dungeon World. Because what happens is any narrative authority that the player gets because of the die roll, it actually translates to questions they get to ask the GM about the scene. But then on the flip side, on the other side of it, the GM, anything that they get from the die roll, the GM gets to add like grim portents or signs of bad things to come, omens. They get to, just add like more complicating factors to the scene, right? When we were playing the Indie Hack, we all agreed this was like a really, really cool thing because it had almost like a little pressure luck sort of like aspect to it, which was really cool. And it was just really nice and easy and flexible. I found it to be a really, really good system for I was adapting one of my old Dungeon World modules for the indie hack, and it worked really well. And I think that give and take, that flexibility of the core mechanic, that core system, particularly as it relates to investigation, was one of the reasons why it went off so well. So yeah, if that sounds cool to you, go check out the indie hack on DriveThruRPG. You can just go there and search for it, or go check out the Scablands Press website. We will have a link on our show notes.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen?
So this is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Ramshackle Crow and his faithful companion, Scabs. So when we last saw Ramshackle and Scabs, they had just finished solving this mirror puzzle door, this door that had this little mirror puzzle on it. They just finished solving the puzzle, and as they were putting the pieces into place, they realized that the mirror showed an image standing behind them, an image of Catspaw Patterson, their version of death, so to speak, their master, the person who has claim over their soul, right? So yeah, let's just pick up from there.
Yeah, I think the last thing I said was son of a bitch.
Was that in reference to Catspaw specifically, or is just a general statement of frustration?
That's a general statement of affairs here in the Hell Vaults, where there's a formerly dead master come back from the grave or something. How did you get here, Catspaw? What are you doing here?
There's actually no response, and the image just disappears, and it's just you and Scabs.
You saw that, Scabs. I'm not crazy. You saw that, right?
And indeed he did. I have a question for you. Whenever Scabs is really nervous, we've talked about his like crazy mutations, right? I think whenever he's nervous, he does something really particular that maybe he transforms in a certain way or he does a certain thing. We talked a little bit about how he like kind of picks at the gross scabs on his body, but what else happens? Like when he's really, really freaked out?
Like when he's like frightened, like his skin like quivers, like it looks like little lumps all over his body, like goose flesh, but the size of marbles.
They're really big. Ew. Okay. Good. He's like, yeah, I saw it. And he's kind of looking around nervously. Do you think he's here with us? Do you think Catspaw's with us?
He has no power here.
He's found us, Ramshackle. He's found us after all these years. I can't believe it.
He can't have any power. He was still desiccated. We grew our flesh back, and he hasn't even done that.
I don't like this one bit. Well, I think we should turn back. Let's go. Let's go back to Dis.
We just spent all of this risk getting this door unlocked, and now you want to turn around after we saw a phantom image? Who knows? Maybe the mirror just shows us things that we're supposed to be afraid of, and we just both happen to be afraid of the same thing.
He gets a little quiet, and he gets this look in his eyes, which is like he's just looking a little like kind of nervous, or maybe like he wants to look tougher than he is, so he's kind of trying to puff himself up a little bit. And he says, I ain't afraid of Catspaw.
Oh, good one, Scabs. You're not afraid of Catspaw. He was the one who enslaved us in the other world, in death beyond the Black Gate. Of course you're afraid of him. It would be irrational to be not afraid of him, and I will not say that I am partners with an irrational being. There are too many of those in Dis.
Oh, I could use a ration. I haven't eaten in hours.
Fine. Here. I reach in my pack and, break off some... I don't know what Dis folks eat. Whatever we can get our hands on, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm sure they have all sorts of, strange foods from various planes of existence, right? But rations would just be maybe it could just be some dried meats of various colors, right?
Yeah, I break him off some of that, and I'm like, this will calm your nerves. Take a minute, take a breather before we go into this door.
He does, and he begins to, he's chewing on this sort of strange colored beef jerky, and you can see those roiling marble-sized lumps on his flesh beginning to kind of smooth out, like a sine wave, right? They're starting to smooth out to a flat wave, so to speak, across his skin.
Now you're starting to look more yourself, Scabs.
He's like, well, all right, let's do this then. Let's go in.
All right, that's more like it. And get ready to open this door that we finally figured out.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, once you had all the puzzle pieces snapped into place, there was like a chunk, and the door kind of came, is kind of swinging on a hinge now, just slightly out of the frame of the door, so you can kind of pull it open.
All right, great. What do we see inside this vault?
At a glance, I will tell you that it appears to be just a single massive room. Okay, it's just a single massive room with really high walls, big, high, smooth iron walls. Okay, and when I say high walls, I mean like 40 feet, maybe. Like it's really quite tall. Just a huge, vast room, lit here and there with sort of like braziers, kind of hanging, from the from hooks in the walls.
Okay, and it's empty.
How closely are you looking?
If I'm looking in the room, there's not like a altar or a large chest or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you go a little bit further, go ahead and give me discern realities.
All right. Yeah, that didn't work.
Was that a miss?
That's a miss.
Okay. I'm going to take over a little bit here. So you and Scabs step forward into this space. You step forward about maybe 15, 20 paces inside. You can see, as you get a little further in, you can see at the other end of this vault, it's a huge space. It's probably about the length of it's at least the length of a football field. Okay. And it's just a big, massive, cavernous room. But at the other end of it, you see a pedestal or a plinth, right, rising up out of the ground. And on this pedestal or plinth, kind of glimmering off the brazier light, can't quite make out what it is, but whatever it is, it's gold. Okay, like you can see like glimmering gold. And Scabs is like, "Oh, that must be what we came for."
Yeah, and I'm like nudging him. I'm like, see, it's all gonna work out in the end.
He gets that look in his eyes, that look you've seen probably 100 times, where it's like just pure greed, right? Like you guys were in the lands beyond the Black Gate, probably tucked away wherever they keep all the dead greedy people, right? And although Ramshackle, I guess you weren't really greedy in life as much as you were just
there was definite greed there.
There's some occasional bouts of greed, not just.
I stole for the detriment of the wicked. That didn't mean I didn't keep what I stole.
That's fair. Okay, good. Well, so he gets his look in his eye, and he just bum rushes it. He just goes for it. He doesn't even wait. He just like rushes forward, right? Stupidly, right? Like, why would they just leave this thing like totally unprotected? And that's when you start to hear this large, heavy, like grinding sound. It sounds like clanking, grinding sound as parts of the wall, like the big, huge iron walls, shapes, pieces, like geometric sort of pieces, rectangles and triangles and that sort of thing. Not unlike the strange geometric pieces of the mirror. But these big, like geometric pieces begin to like fly out of the walls and form. They start to fuse together and form a big angular knight guardian. And he has a sword like that there's a piece that comes out of the wall that's like a sword, and this thing is like 30 feet tall, and Scabs just stops dead in his tracks, and he looks back at you.
We'll just bookend this very nicely. Son of a bitch.
I guess we'll end it there.
That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
Hey, we're a production of The Gauntlet. I want to very quickly say that The Gauntlet, which is on Patreon now, we have a brand new Patreon goal, which I encourage listeners to go check out. The goal is, well, we'll detail it here. Really cool for Discern Realities listeners. If we hit this goal, it's $6.50 a month. If we hit that goal, we are going to be able to produce 2 deluxe special editions of our magazine codex. So the first issue will be about our Company of the Three Kings Living campaign that we do in The Gauntlet. It's very cool. If you're one of the players in that, that'll be very important to you. Or if you've been kind of watching it
And that's the Dungeon World Living campaign.
It is indeed. Yeah. So we're going to do like all the different like materials that we've gathered, so to speak, related to this living campaign. We're going to put them all together in an issue of Codex. But another one, the second issue is going to be a Discern Realities annual. And so this is something that people have asked us about like a bunch, right? We get asked this constantly. Like, when are we going to pull together all the unique items and custom moves and set pieces from Discern Realities, along with all the contest entries, like all the contest entries we've gotten over this past year? When are we going to put them all together in one place? And well, if we hit this goal, we're going to do it. The reason why we need to hit the goal, though, is because we want to do it right. So we're going to have art, we're going to have maps, we're going to have the text revised and edited. It's going to be a beautiful thing. And if you are on the Patreon already and you get Codex, you already know like the level of quality you have to look forward to. So I'm super excited about it, but we got to get to that goal. So if that sounds cool to you, listener, I encourage you to please go pledge. Everybody gets this magazine no matter what level they pledge at, if once we get it under production and get it done. So yeah, we would definitely appreciate your help with that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The Patreon is at patreon.com/gauntlet. Our website is gauntlet-rpg.com, and we're on Twitter at gauntletrpg.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.